ask the right questions. I don't. So I did you a solid. I asked the questions for you. This is Fake Questions, Real Answer. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I am your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content and Senior NFL Contributor at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We are also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. Happy Friday, everybody. Rise and shine on a Friday morning. We are at the end of the week. Congratulations. You made it. And we got a big episode for you today. I'm joined, as always, by producer JT. JT, how are you?
I'm good. Happy Friday. Busy work week. But I got a question. How are you, man? How are you feeling? There's a couple big things going on in your life.
A couple big things. A big Houston game on Sunday.
Big Houston
That's
game
pretty
is number
big.
one, of course.
Yeah. What else? I'm getting married on Saturday night.
Yeah,
that's a small element of my week.
The Houston game is more important, though. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the Tennessee game on Saturday night it's been wild. So yeah, this is the last episode of the Hot Read in which I will be a single man. I'm getting married to my beautiful future wife this weekend. JT is actually one of my groomsmen, so we are very busy after this show. We're recording this, slapping it on the internet, and then going off to have me betrothed to my future wife, and it's going to be a good time. It's been really hard to pretend anything else is important to me this week, with work and covering the Titans and any other element of my life. It's just a long time coming, and I'm not really nervous about any one thing in particular. It's going to be great. I'm excited about it. It's just like that anxiety is building up inside me. I've been tracking my Apple Watch all week just to see, because I have a baseline heart rate of around 70 BPM. And every day this week, my average daily resting heart rate has increased a little bit more just because I'm so excited and anxious about it. So today, my average resting heart rate is 15 beats per minute more. Because I'm 2 days away now from being married. And that's, for the rest of your life, it's a big deal. And I'm going to have all my friends and family there, and there's a million things to do. So, but enough about me. That's me. And we'll talk about how it went on Monday morning. But for today, I will, for the next hour and change, probably just pretend that that's not happening. And pretend like I care about this Houston game this week, which I do. I do care about this game, and there's more to talk about in this game. Unlike the Commanders game a couple of weeks ago, which was ugly and also incredibly boring, this one is ugly, but it's not boring. There's plenty to talk about in this game, and we're going to get into all of that. Before we dive into our main show today, I got to shout out a 5-star review that was left to us. I've been asking y'all to leave those. Somebody out there actually listens to the show and is a good person and hears my plea for help and followed through. So this comes from a Titans fan in Connecticut. I love this. Left a 5-star review, and he said, "No one loves their own work title more than Easton. Keep it up." Which, fair. That's fair. I do mention that at the top of every show. And so that's fair. Thank you so much for leaving the 5-star review. Thank you for listening. I'll go ahead and take the time now to say, if you listen to this show regularly, or even if this is your first time, I promise it's going to be a 5-star performance. You're going to like the rest of this show. We got a lot of information to bring to you, but please go and give us a 5-star review. Leave a 5-star rating, and then write whatever you want in the review. We will shout you out and read it on the show. It takes you 10 seconds. I know every show you've ever listened to has asked you to do that. Make this the one you actually follow through on, because it means a lot to us. A small local show, smaller local show. It means a ton for future opportunities when you leave us those reviews. So just write anything. It takes you 10 seconds. We will love you forever for doing it. So that's enough selling of the show. Today, in the big show, I want to try something out. I thought about sending out an all call this week on Twitter for some Q&A questions that we wanted to address on the show this week. But as I went to do so, I thought, man, there are a handful of things that I really want to talk about this week. And frankly, I just don't trust you heathens to ask the right questions. I don't. So I did you a solid. I asked the questions for you. This is fake questions, real answers. And producer JT, he's going to run these questions that you all asked, that I asked myself, by me here, and we're gonna address them. So JT, are you ready for fake questions, real answers?
I am ready to go.
All right, what's the first question?
So we're going to start off here with how you've been a long advocate for the Titans replacing Dennis Daly on the offensive line.
This is true.
And if they were to do it, who should it be? And will they actually make a change at all?
So, been beating this drum, obviously, on this show, on any other work that I've done, written, video, audio, otherwise, for a couple of weeks now. Dennis Daly at left tackle has to go. In preparation for today's show, I went to pff.com and I checked to see where they had him graded, because last I checked, he was 70th out of 72 starting tackles in the league. Well, I went today and I saw that he had fallen not to 72nd, but to 75th out of 72 starting tackles. PFF has 2 backup tackles, which granted Dennis Daly is a backup, but he's starting now, graded ahead of Dennis Daly, including so it's all the starters in the league, every single starter, and then 2 backups, and then it's Dennis Daly at the bottom of the pit. He's so bad. If you want visual confirmation of how bad he is, and if you have eyes and you watch the games, that should be all you need. But if you want to check the tape, go and listen to the Mike Herndon Show. Any of the last 3 episodes we've done, it'll be on YouTube by now if you're listening on Friday. From yesterday's show, we once again looked into some Dennis Daly tape and evaluated how he is just a game breaker and they have to make a change. I have been hashtag anything but Daly for a little bit now. The 2 questions you asked are 2 very different ones. Who should it be and will they do it? I'll start with will they do it because it's a shorter answer. Unfortunately, if you read any of Jim Wyatt's work, who Jim has been very kind to me on the beat, love Jim, long time, great guy, obviously, and he's the most connected by virtue of being an employee of the team. So what he says is typically an insight into some of the stuff that even those of us on the press pool beat don't quite get. We're not privy to all of the information he is. He continues to hint in all of his written work that he doesn't think the Titans are going to be making a change at left tackle in anytime soon. And specifically, he's not too warm on the idea that they may look at Dylan Radins. Now, I highly recommend you go and watch the Mike Herndon Show from yesterday, because we looked at both Daly and Radins had a sneaky good game. I had a little mea culpa here. We spent a lot of Monday's episode this week talking about how I thought Radins had a really poor game on Sunday, and that's really just a reflection of how hard it is to evaluate offensive line performance in the game. Live television copy, it's brutal, even for people far more qualified than I to evaluate offensive line performance. It is really tough without the film to go and look at how an offensive tackle performs. Now, if they're just a turnstile and they allow 5 sacks, that much you can tell from the TV copy, but the nuance of it, that's tough. And so we came out of that game having not seen any of the advanced stats, not seeing any of the game film. We didn't know exactly how well he played, but to me, in real time, it looked bad. Then on Monday, we got later in the day some of those advanced analytics, and it turned out, hey, he had a good grade, the best grade, actually, in many respects, for the Titans offensive line in this game. And then the film came out, and you looked and you said, wow, okay, so he had 2 or 3 kind of bad brain fart moments, some mental errors that aren't great, and kind of blew up some plays a little bit. One of them, I think, was more just a Colts made a great play than him making an error. But other than that, he was really effective. He was a plus in the run game. Here was my evaluation when I looked into it. I talked a little bit about this on the Mike Herndon Show, and this, I actually heard Greg Cosell, I believe, on the Buck Rising podcast, the download, or the install rather, in the last 24 hours. He talked about this as well. And if you don't have to trust my word on it, trust Greg Cosell's, obviously. But he kind of saw the same thing that I did. Radins struggles a bit in his blocking, particularly the run blocking, when he is in solo blocking responsibilities. When he is one-on-one, he's kind of hit or miss. But when he is given a teamwork responsibility, oftentimes when he's given a duo blocking responsibility, which is just double teams across the board on the line, he is a real plus. And of course, like, yeah, duh, guy's going to work with another guy to go 2-on-1. They're going to be good. But he's better than you'd even expect most guys to be in those duo blocking assignments. And his ability to climb to the next level and pick up a linebacker off of a duo block, or shed his initial block off to another lineman next to him and move up and block downfield is really great. He's the best, I think, on the team at it, besides Aaron Brewer, who obviously his build allows him to do that. Radens is an athlete in that way, and the Titans run out of duo a lot. So there were a number of instances where you're like, wow, this guy actually could be a significant addition to this team in the run blocking game. I fully believe, and Mike Herndon agrees, and I think anybody with eyeballs should also agree, they need to give Dylan Radens a chance at left tackle. They need to do it. He's the guy on this team that I want to see play there. Now, we've seen him play at left tackle once with the Titans. He started the Thursday night game against San Francisco last year. He was serviceable. Not great, but he was serviceable. Significantly better than anything Daly has done this year. We saw him in college and all through high school. Before his NFL career, all he had done was play left tackle. So it's the position that's most natural to him. When Nate Davis comes back and he no longer has to fill in at the right guard position like he has the last 2 games, he needs to be given a shot at left tackle. Now, unfortunately, to circle back to Jim Wyatt, he doesn't think that they're going to do that. For some reason, whatever the reason may be, he does not see the Titans giving Radens that chance, which is really unfortunate. And I think that they should. Listen, if the reason they're not going to give him that chance is because they're going to give LaRaven Clark that chance, so we've talked about ad nauseum on this show. Go to last week's shows. We talked about this already. Fine. Make it Clark. I don't care. Clark, Radens, whoever. Not Dennis Daly. Can't be Dennis Daly. Can't do it. Have to do something else, anything else. Because we're at the point now where there is no, well, the grass isn't always greener. It can't be less green. The grass can't be more dead. It can't be worse than what Daly has given this team. So they have to move on. I think it should be Radens. If it's Clark, fine. If they make a move to trade for somebody who we'll talk about here in a moment, fine. But anybody but Daly. Next question.
One of the biggest topics of debate this week online is Kyle Phillips being placed on IR. It looked like he was coming back, but now, of course, the wide receiver will miss the next 4 to 5 games until he is eligible to come back. A couple of those being pretty substantial and pivotal games in the Titans' schedule. However, do you think he was overrated in hindsight coming out at the beginning of the season?
Absolutely not. I think this is a ridiculous line of questioning. I'm not about subtweeting people on this show. I think that's childish. I'm also not about not allowing people to defend themselves and for you, the listener, to be able to hear both sides of an argument. So I highly encourage you to go to my Twitter, just search Easton Freeze Kyle Phillips, and the most recent tweets will be this conversation that I and Teron Davenport, covering the team for ESPN, had with Tic Tac Titans is the account. We just, I forget how exactly it came up, but the Tic Tac Titans account, his name is Tyler, by the way. Tyler, if I end up mischaracterizing his argument, please refer to his words on Twitter. Go find the thread and read it. But his argument essentially was that, oh, look, another wide receiver for the Titans that was overhyped in the preseason, now going to IR and not contributing. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous for a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't see how Kyle Phillips was overhyped when he's been healthy, he's been nothing but impressive. The reason that the hype around Kyle Phillips, a 5th round draft pick wide receiver out of UCLA, the reason that he was hyped up so much was because it was clear to everybody in the preseason and in training camp that this guy was going to be a dude. He's got skills. He's refined. For a rookie in particular, he is more pro ready than most, and he's going to contribute to this team immediately. What did he do? In the first game, he contributed to this team immediately. He led the team, I believe, in targets and receptions in that game. I believe he also led the team in yards in that game. He was Ryan Tannehill's safety blanket in that Giants game. He was the reason that they got down the field and into field goal position at the end of the game to win. They ultimately didn't, but it was his contributions in the 2-minute offense there at the end that allowed them to get into position. It was also his contribution at the very last play, the last play he made that was a catch that ultimately put them in position to kick the field goal, where he fell out of bounds and hurt his shoulder. And since then, we've talked about it. He's not been the same. He's been hurt. They've held him out of some games. They've limited his snap count significantly in some games. He was not right. He looked to be finally back to normal last week. After the bye, he'd had extended rest, and he looked like he was ready to go until either Thursday or Friday last week. He was added midweek to the injury report with a hamstring injury that ultimately was a tweak significant enough for them to decide to put him on IR. So he is now out for a minimum of 4 games. I think that he'll be back. It's just a hamstring injury for a really young guy. It's not something that, unless he tore it, should last all that long, but we don't know. So I'll reserve that judgment. Needless to say, I think he's going to be back and contribute. How can a player be overrated if all they've done when they're healthy is meet expectations? You cannot account for injury in your rating of a player's talent. Your talent evaluation and your projection in terms of what they're going to contribute to a team, you can make educated guesses with health, but with fluky things, with injuries, and especially the injuries of his the nature of the injuries that he's had so far, right? Like, part of the argument that was made online was that, well, what do you expect from a 5th-round rookie that's slender, slot-only guy? He's quick, but he's small and he's fragile. Small, fragile little 5th-round wide receiver. What are you talking about? That shoulder injury had nothing to do with his size. When you just do a basic inquiry into the AC joint injury that he had, you'll realize that, the shoulder, whether you're absolutely chiseled and have a massive frame or have the smallest, most slender frame in the world, that's an element of the human anatomy that is not well protected. And actually, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So if he'd been a bigger, stronger, better built receiver, he probably still would have had that same injury. It had nothing to do, him being pushed out of bounds and falling on his shoulder, with his fragility. And then a hamstring injury, we see Julio Jones has the world's worst hamstrings at this point. DeAndre Hopkins, big receivers have hamstring issues just as much as small receivers. Tweaking a hamstring has nothing to do with your size or your fragility. So that's a ridiculous point. It's a ridiculous point. You can't have projected that a new, young rookie guy was going to deal with these fluky injuries to begin his career. Also, let me check my watch. We're only 7 games into the season. 6 for the Titans, 7 weeks of the season in of this guy's rookie year. Are we really gonna bang the gavel after less than half of a season on this guy having been overrated? We don't know what he's going to pan out to be. We don't even know what his contribution this season is going to look like. This is akin to deciding that Bud Dupree is a complete and utter bust before last week's game, and there's no way that he's going to contribute in any way to this Titans team by the end of the year. Baloney, man. Did you see last week? Bud Dupree was maybe the best player on the field on either side of the ball. Okay? Injuries in the NFL are inevitable. They come at weird times. It obviously sucks for Kyle Phillips that he has dealt with these 2 injuries at the beginning of his otherwise very promising career. But to be overrated, you have to perform significantly worse than you were expected to. And when Kyle Phillips has performed for this team, albeit a very small sample size so far, but in training camp, in the preseason, and in his first game, he's done nothing but live up to expectations. So it's a ridiculous question. Kyle Phillips is not overrated, and it's just foolishness. It's foolishness. Next question.
So in our first 2 questions, we've kind of talked about 2 areas of the Titans roster here that is lacking a little bit of depth. Of course, the wide receiver position is missing 2 of their top targets on that receiving core and on this line. However, on Tuesday is the trade deadline. Do you foresee the Titans making any moves? And if so, are there any guys in mind you think they should go out for?
So it's an interesting question. Like you said, trade deadline on the horizon. Really 2 fundamental questions here. Should they and would they? I'll go ahead and say, would they? I think no. I don't think that they're going to make a move. It's just the vibe. I don't have any intel on that. It's just the vibe that I'm getting from this team. Talking to Mike Vrabel a little bit, looking at his answers to certain things during the week in press conferences, just knowing the nature of John Robinson, who's not afraid to make trades, but I find it interesting. I think the trade deadline is an interesting time to be able to psychoanalyze the mindset of these front offices, and that's kind of where my bread is buttered a little bit. I think just evaluating the mindset and the storylines surrounding the league, that is what I find most fascinating, and that's why I love the trade deadline, because you can kind of, based on the actions of these front offices, tell how they perceive themselves. And that's what we're trying to figure out, right? What are these teams? We think we have a grasp on what they are. What do they think they are? Because sometimes it's not the same answer. And it can give you some insight into what their expectations for themselves are this season and going forward. With the Titans right now, they're not in a position to be making trades for 1-year rental type guys. They're not in a position to be making trades for players that are going to not reasonably contribute to this team beyond this year. In order to be in a position to make those kind of moves, you have to be a 2021 Los Angeles Rams, a 2022 Buffalo Bills, or Philadelphia Eagles. We've seen these teams make these trades. The Eagles, for example, going and getting another pass rusher from Chicago when they don't even really need one, but they're all in this year. Howie Roseman has pushed his chips to the middle of the table, as he should, with a young quarterback on a rookie contract, as well as studs all around him, and a really, really well-constructed roster. He's put his chips in the middle of the table on this year. He's trying to win it all, and that's the right move. The Titans aren't in that position. They don't have one hole here, one hole there. They have holes in a number of places, and they're also in a, like we've talked about all year long, a transitional position. This is a transitional year. This is a pivot year for them. So they could make trades, and this team could improve via the trade market at the trade deadline, but it would need to be for guys that could reasonably contribute beyond this year. That's what made DJ Moore, for example, look so attractive, because he was a guy that if they were to make a move for him, which I think has kind of fallen by the wayside at this point, I don't think Moore's going anywhere in Carolina, but we'll see. It would have been a situation where he'd be on contract with the team, and they would have expected, at the very least, for him to be a multi-year guy that stuck around for a while. Well, there's not a whole lot of that out there right now, and that's what makes me think this team is not in a position to make a trade. Let's dive into their heads a little bit right now. What are the two glaring holes? And they've been this all year long. It's the offensive line. It's the wide receiver room, right? Those are the two biggest weaknesses for this team. When the Titans brass and the Titans coaches look at their roster and see the trade deadline approaching, they're going to think, okay, we might have a move or two in us. We're not trying to go all in. We might make a savvy move here before the deadline to bolster one of these rooms. Where do we think we need it most? Well, let's look at wide receiver. First of all, we have to start from the baseline of this team does clearly not value wide receiver like the rest of the league does. That's not where their bread is buttered on offense. They obviously value receivers, and they've made investments like a first-round pick in Treylon Burks, paying Robert Woods, drafting Kyle Phillips. Like, they've made some moves there, but not like the rest of the league does, because their running game, their physicality, their old brown-nosed style football is the way they prefer to play the game. And with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, you're kind of limited in terms of how many different mouths you can bring in to reasonably feed, because, again, that's not what he does. He's a play action quarterback. We know what he is. He's not going to sling it around the yard 50 or 60 times a game. They have to look at this roster. I'm certain this is what they see. All right, well, we got Robert Woods currently healthy on the team. Okay, cool. Check. We still really like NWI. We want him to remain our third or fourth option. He's still healthy. Check. It's kind of bare right now. The cupboard is bare at wide receiver. But on the IR, we've got three guys that we organizationally, internally, we believe are going to be contributors to this team. Most of them this year. Treylon Burks, he's set to come back as early as week 10, right around the corner, when Denver comes to town and they have their next home game. That guy's going to come back, and we want him to be our wide receiver 1 or 2. And then Kyle Phillips, assuming his hamstring injury isn't a big deal, He'll come back in 4 weeks and he'll be back in the rotation as wide receiver 2 or 3. And then Racing McMath, still a wild card on the IR, eligible to come back whenever they deem him ready to come back. Now, will he come back this year? We don't know. The way they've talked about him, maybe not. But it kind of seems like those 3 guys being inserted back into the roster, that makes up a very young, talented core that they see as being enough for them to make do for now and be more satisfied at that position down the road. At the offensive line position, the cupboard is very bare and their reinforcements aren't coming. Taylor Lewan is done, probably done as a Titan. Dennis Daly has to go. They're still trying to figure that out. Nate Davis, they need to be back in the rotation. They need Ben Jones to remain healthy. They need NPF to continue to develop. That's about all they have in terms of options. The depth beyond that is gruesome. It's bad. So who's out there? Well, kind of 2 guys. And Isaiah Wynn from New England, I don't see as a great option. He's an option. He'd be fine. I don't know if the fit is right. Andre Dillard with the Eagles is the one, if they made a move, that'd be the one I think most likely to be made. Now, granted, he's a guy that may end up being a 1-year rental because he's only got this last year on his contract and then they'd have to pay him. So they may not make the move for that reason. And that will make total sense to me. But if they do make a move, he's a guy that is a starting caliber, now perceived healthy tackle that can come in and play for this team and play at a high level and be maybe even the saving grace of this offensive line. So they may make a move there. I don't know if the draft compensation is going to make sense for them, but we have a history between John Robinson and Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles. They've made trades before. That's the one I think that's most likely to happen. That being said, I lean towards they're not going to make a move, and we'll have to see with the deadline approaching. Next question.
Someone who's really broken out this season is Tier Tart. What have you thought about him on this early season, and how do you think he's going to perform throughout the rest of the season?
I have 2 overarching thoughts on Tier Tart. One you'll like, one you won't. The one that you'll like is that Tier Tart is the most improved player on this Titans roster, and he is a living testimony to how fantastic this entire Titans organizational operation is at defensive line. And I'll go into detail on that here in a moment. The thing that you won't like is, I think very strongly, I believe you should really enjoy Tier Tart while he's around, because I do not think he will be around very long. Let me explain. First of all, the reason he is such a fantastic testament to what these guys do, and these 2 things tie in well with each other, because I think the reason that they aren't going to be able to hang on to him for very long is directly correlated with the fact that they do this so well. They find Tier Tarts regularly, seemingly. They find fantastic defensive line depth talent from the undrafted free agent pool on a regular basis in the last couple of years. And this coaching staff and this front office should be commended for how well they do that. They're kind of building their team right now around that defensive line, and it's paying dividends. You got Tier Tart and Jeffrey Simmons absolutely owning people up the middle, and Tier Tart has made a dramatic leap this season. He looks like a top 10 guy. Statistically, he is a top 10, maybe even top 5 guy at this point at his position, at the interior pass rush, the interior defensive lineman position. He's a stud. And for 2 years before this season, he was one of those guys. Hey, man, J-Rob found a gem in the undrafted free agent market. That's a feel-good story. Tier Tart, look at that, getting a couple snaps a game, making the most out of them. That's great. He's taken a dramatic leap this year. He's no longer a feel-good story. He's a stud. He's a bona fide star. He's tremendously strong and big. He looks like a budget version of Jeffrey Simmons out there. He's fantastic. And for that reason, I think that beyond this year, he's going to be a restricted free agent, which means the Titans will be able to put a tender on him, which will keep him with the team on a $3 million-ish salary. Should they put a second round tender on him, unless another team is willing to give up a second round draft pick to acquire Tier Tart in free agency, he will remain with the Titans. And I don't think anybody's going to be willing to make that trade, especially if they're smart enough to look at the Titans roster situation to realize, beyond this year, Tart's probably not going to be around. He's probably going to be available, and we'll be able to just pay him because he's going to get paid at this rate. He is making a case for himself to be paid top 10, maybe top 5 at his position after next season. Because beyond then, I don't think the Titans are going to be able to justify paying the ungodly sum of money that they're eventually going to pay to Jeffrey Simmons and then spending even that much more on the interior defensive line. And the part of that is just the economics of it, the money, the math isn't going to make sense probably. But even if they could make it make sense, and this is a shrewd business position, why would you fork over the money for that guy when you've got a Jeffrey Simmons, you've got that cornerstone, and you have now a multi-year track record of being really good at finding, bringing in, developing, coaching, molding, creating these stars, or at the very least, these high-end rotational pieces on the defensive line like they have. You see Mario Edwards come in, get coached up, and be really flashing in his first couple games with the Titans. That's impressive. It looks like coaching to me. You look at Naquan Jones, who came in, undrafted free agent, made some splashes. He's kind of fallen off a little bit, but he was serviceable in his first couple of years. Laurel Murchison was the same way before he kind of got passed up by guys like Jones and like Tart. Deshaun Hand, like the list goes on and on. They are very deep at this position, and they are very good at finding these guys. So I think for those reasons, you should enjoy Teair Tart while he lasts, because I don't think that he will be a Titan beyond next year. Next question.
Let's talk about Ryan Tannehill. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about will he play this week? Will he not? Do the Titans even need him? How important is he to this matchup this week?
I'll address the do they need him part first, because that's another ridiculous internet line of reasoning. I've seen a couple, and this has not been a lot of people. Luckily, not many are dumb enough to think this, but a lot of folks, a few number of folks I've seen on the internet the past couple of days talk about, hey, just you got Kansas City on the horizon, Sunday Night Football. You're going to need Tannehill in that game for sure. So just even if he can go, rest him in Houston. You should be able to win that game with the run game and Malik Willis. Just kind of make a chess move, calculated move here. Let Ryan sit. Don't do that. Stop. That's not how this is going to work. It's bound to be a failure if that's what they do. Now, could they win with Malik Willis against Houston? They could. They'd still be the better roster, top to bottom. Excuse me, but they need Tannehill. Willis is not ready. I think that's still eminently clear. I don't think that they're excited to move on to him anytime soon. Not to say that they're not excited about his development, but he's got a long way to go. And Ryan Tannehill, they need him to play in this game. Houston is a frisky team. We've been talking about it all year, JT. What have we been calling Houston? The highest ceiling competent team. It's what they are. I think that they're the highest ceiling competent team in the league. They're right above all of the incompetent teams, which there are a number of. They're in the back of the classroom of all of the competent teams. Now, they lack some real talent at a number of positions, and so they're very limited. Their ceiling is low, and a couple mistakes a game will cost them the game ultimately. But they play really disciplined football, and they have some stars at some positions starting to emerge, and that's what makes them a really tricky, sneaky, scary opponent each week, regardless of who they're facing. They've not been blown out pretty much at all this year. They've been in most every game they have played, and in any divisional matchup, you always know that divisional games are weird. They are always closer than you think they should be. So the Titans have to be wary of the Texans in this game. They need Tannehill out there. His injury status we'll get to a little bit later. It's kind of up in the air, but they need him there. So I think the first part of the question on what his situation is with the injury, let's kind of bump that to the injury report in the news segment today. We don't know a ton, but we know some, and we'll talk about that then. Next question.
Of course, we've talked a lot about just personnel and the trade deadline so far, but let's talk about the matchup at hand. As you said, this Houston Texans team should not be written off so quickly. But let's talk about, as you said, there are a couple of key pieces on that team that might be a little tricky for the Titans. Which one scares you the most in this matchup this week?
JT, who am I about to say?
I honestly don't know. Maybe, oh, well, I want to say it's your boy Damian Pierce, but that's me
Of
just
course
throwing.
it's Dameon Pierce. Of course it's Dameon Pierce. It's always been Dameon Pierce. I love Dameon Pierce. I think he's a stud. Is there fantasy bias in there? Definitely. But also, even if I did not have him on my fantasy team, use your eyeballs, kids. He's a real NFL running back. He's got so much tread on those tires. He's explosive. I think him and Ken Walker and Breece Hall before he went down looked like they were rounding into form as a really, really nice rookie class of running backs. And I think here's a take for you. I am significantly, if I'm the Titans, I'm significantly more concerned with what Dameon Pierce does to my defense than what Jonathan Taylor does to my defense. Dameon Pierce is for sure the scarier running back at this moment. I think it's without question he is. He has been on some Sundays their entire offense. He's capable of doing that. And his blocking situation, the guys he's running behind, significantly better than that of Jonathan Taylor. Significantly, maybe not significantly, but I think better than maybe. I think that the offensive line run blocking combined with the running ability of Dameon Pierce, I think it's definitely the best the Titans have faced all season. And I'm including Saquon Barkley in that. Saquon looks great. I think he's a better running back right now, but I don't think his run blocking right now is as good really as the Texans. Now, that's granted if they're all healthy, and there are some Texans linemen on the injury report, so that could be a good thing for the Titans. But Dameon Pierce, you got to look out for him in this game. The Titans have a really, really stout run defense. I think it's been, actually, I know it's been the best in the league for the past 4 games on their 4-game winning streak. It is far and away the best run defense in the league in the last month. It's going to be tested against Dameon Pierce, and I think we're really going to find out. A little heat check right here. Are the Titans nearly as good in the run defense as they've looked in the last month? Dameon Pierce is going to be a problem. I guarantee you this week on the whiteboard in the game plan room in the Titans St. Thomas Ascension Park, they have a list of names circled at the top of the whiteboard. Dameon Pierce is one of those guys. Guarantee it. Next question.
And our final question of this little segment here. Let's step away from football at all and let's talk about this new stadium project. Of course,
Yeah.
we're going to pull up some pictures here. And if you want to see these pictures and follow along with what we're looking at, we do now have this show on YouTube. So
That's right.
Go on over and look at us there. But let's look at some of these renders that, of course, came out earlier this week. And what are your thoughts about them? What is your reaction to all of this coming out, and how do you feel about it?
I love it. I think the general response from what I saw online was overwhelmingly positive, which is great. The Titans and Manica, the architectural firm that's in charge of designing this building, really took a leap of faith here with the design of this field house. Because frankly, whenever you build a stadium like this, that is a little bit, I mean, the outside, the facade is different than what you expect from a stadium. You're always taking a little bit of a gamble that people are going to respond poorly to that. Well, they didn't, because I think that they did a fantastic job of building an elegant looking, not ridiculous for a stadium. Like they really towed the line between, hey, this is a stadium and it looks like a stadium, but also it doesn't look like a traditional stadium on the outside. But also you don't look at it and you think, what is that, a big warehouse? Like what are they doing there? Like, no, it's a stadium. It's a football stadium, and it's the architectural design, I think, perfectly encapsulates Nashville. Like we talked about this a little bit before the designs came out. We wanted them to go with something that was not generic, was not bland, something that was going to be not just iconic and recognizable, but also you look at it and you think, that looks like Tennessee. That looks like Nashville. And I think they nailed it. I think the exterior, the modern look of it, it's kind of, Mike Herndon compared it to like a Chip and Joanna Gaines look. It's kind of like a modern antebellum, I think is a great way to put it. I love the terraces on the outside, because part of the thing that people disliked about the domed element of the stadium is, well, Tennessee has some really nice days, has some nice weather sometimes. In the South here, we prefer to have football played outside, and we like being able to enjoy the elements on game day. Well, they put like big wraparound porches around the whole building on multiple levels. So you're going to be able to get that indoor-outdoor experience, kind of the best of both worlds on game days, and it's going to be an awesome community hangout. It kind of reminds me of all of the growing popularity in hotel rooftop bars and restaurants in Nashville. So that's another kind of Nashville tie-in that I really love here. I love that they went with the roof design like in SoFi. So if you've not seen the pictures, the technology is something that the name of which I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but it's a full translucent roof across the top. It's not like an opening like you'd see at NRG Stadium in Houston, or like a sliding window like you'd see in Dallas or in Vegas rather. Like it's a full let the sunshine in from the entire roof situation, which is great. And it allows them to have this feel on the inside, despite it being a temperature controlled indoor stadium. It's going to feel like you're still outside. And that's great, because I hate the domes in the NFL when you look at like in New Orleans, whenever you watch the Saints play in primetime, they get those cutaway shots up into the stands. And I just always look up there like, man, I wonder how far it goes, because it's pitch dark and I can't see anything. I see 4 people in the first 4 rows, and then the rest of it is just this black void. You can tell even when they're just looking at the field from the camera angles, you're like, man, it's dark in there. Like it looks like the players are on a Broadway stage and their audience is up in the darkness. I'd imagine if you're not in the first 4 rows, you like turn your phone on in there, and the people behind you are like, hey, turn that light off. We're trying to watch the game. That is weird to me. I hate that in football. I love this because the entire stadium is going to be lit up. When it's prime time, of course, you'll get the night sky, and so you'll be under the lights. So it won't feel artificial in that way either. They did their best to let all the elements in, and I love that about the look. Now we have to point out that it does in fact look like a giant Topgolf or a giant Whole Foods, which is hilarious, and I love it. I think Topgolf is the most accurate description so far, because it really does look a lot like the Topgolf architecture. But Whole Foods is really funny because it looks like a giant Whole Foods, and also the AFC South now. JT made a hilarious meme. It's slowly being taken. Yeah, here it is. If you're watching on YouTube, it's slowly being taken over by giant mutant freak versions of grocery stores. You got the giant, ugly, oversized Kroger that is Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Now you got the Whole Foods Market coming to Nashville in 2026. Are we going to see? I mean, Publix is the natural fit, obviously, for Jacksonville. Their next stadium, if they ever build another one here and not in London, I think it should be a giant Publix-looking building. I think that they should continue the trend. And then JT, clever, Wegmans for NRG Stadium. I think it fits. So we've got the AFC South is now just grocery stores, which is hilarious to me. And yeah, that's my reaction. I love it. I think it's going to be great. We got a long time to wait to figure out all the details about it. And we're going to be talking about it for years now, but those are my thoughts. And that is the end of the segment. Fake questions, real answers. I really enjoyed that. We're for sure doing that segment again, but for now we got to move on. Let's get to the news with producer JT.
Let's hop into the news here. And of course, the first thing that we're going to talk about is this Thursday injury report. And although the Titans had a early bye this year in week 6, that injury report grew back to the same size it has been all season.
Did not matter.
A couple of things for the Titans. Let's start with the bad news is Jeffrey Simmons and Rashad Weaver both logged 2 non-practices this week. Of course, Jeffrey Simmons is nursing that ankle injury, and Rashad Weaver has a back injury. Do you think they're going to play it all this week? And if they don't, how big of an impact is it for this Titans team?
Weaver, I have no idea, and if he can't play, it's a big deal. They are super thin at that outside linebacker edge position, so they need him. With Simmons, I don't know, but I'll give you the context that I have. And I'm not a doctor, not going to play doctor, but here's my frame of reference. In the locker room on Sunday, when I was in there after the game, Ryan Tannehill, Jeffrey Simmons both had ankle injuries. Tannehill, hobbling around, looked really worse for wear, looked like he was in a lot of pain. Simmons, you couldn't tell he had an ankle injury. Looked fine, said he was fine, didn't seem to be in any pain. I think that they're just giving him time. Jeffrey Simmons is gathering nothing from practice at this point right now. He doesn't need to be out there really at all. besides just the walkthroughs and the game planning. He'll get all of that without practicing. So I think they're just letting him heal up that ankle as best as possible, and they know he doesn't need the practice. I think he's going to play.
Then looking at a couple of things that are good news for the Titans this week. Let's start with Ryan Tannehill, who did log a limited participation today at Thursday practice. And then, of course, Nate Davis also logging 2 limited participations this week. And then a couple of other guys, smaller guys on this list, David Long, Zach Cunningham, and Joe Jones all participating today. So that's some good news for that defensive depth if either Simmons or Weaver cannot go this week.
Yep, we'll find out more on Friday, but to me, it's Simmons, Tannehill, and Nate Davis are the keys. Nate Davis needs to be back this week. I think that he will be, but I thought that last week, so we will see. Him being limited in practice doesn't tell us a whole lot. With Simmons, like I said, I think he's going to play, and then Tannehill, don't know, man. I think that he will. He's a tough SOB, and if he can play, I think that he will. To me, and again, not to play doctor, but this is what I'm gathering from absorbing all this information. I think it's just a standard ankle sprain. It's clearly not a high ankle sprain, which would be much worse. It's significant enough that it's, hindering him, but I think everybody's sprained their ankle, right? Think to the last time you had a rough ankle sprain where you didn't have to, get a cast or anything, but it's just like, man, I'm going to throw a brace on there. I can't do anything athletic for a little bit. I'm kind of nursing it. That's what I kind of think he's dealing with, which to me is just a pain management thing and a liberal usage of tape each and every Sunday, which they'll probably tape him up real good and he won't be able to feel his toes. But if he can stand, he'll probably be out there and just not be nearly as mobile.
Let's move to the Houston Texans side of this injury report. A couple of notables that have logged 2 DNPs this week. Defensive lineman Malik Collins with a chest injury, and then, of course, Nico Collins, the wide receiver, with a groin injury. Of course, there's been some talk this week about Mike Vrabel calling Nico Collins a very good wide receiver.
Mike Vrabel has a crush on Nico Collins.
He really
man.
does. So
but he has a crush on anybody who can block at the receiver position, and he thinks Nico Collins the best blocking receiver in the game, which, granted, he's fantastic.
Yes, but maybe a good thing for the Titans this week if Nico Collins cannot go. A couple of things on the offensive line. Of course, we were talking about Dameon Pierce, how important that offensive line is for the Texans. Offensive lineman Kenyon Green went back to a full participation on Thursday. Justin McCray, another offensive lineman, logged a limited participation, and then another offensive lineman for them, AJ Cann, did not practice with an illness today.
Yeah, the biggest names on there are definitely Nico Collins and Green, Kenyon Green, their rookie offensive lineman. He's a starter. He's been struggling, but if they have to have a backup, that'll be a big deal for their line to have a backup in there. And with Nico Collins, I don't think he's going to play. Doesn't look like he's going to play, but if he does, that'll be another physical element to their game.
Moving back to let's talk about the importance of Tannehill out there. Of course, just a little stat to throw out to you. Tannehill's all-time record as a Titan versus the AFC South is 15-3. So if it's really important for him to be out there, if you didn't think it was that important for him to be out there, it clearly is against this Texans team with that great record there. Moving on to a couple of wide receiver moves that they've made this week. Of course, we talked about Kyle Phillips going on the IR. However, the Titans did sign a wide receiver, signing Chris Conley from the Chiefs practice squad. Chris Conley, 30 years old, has kind of become this journeyman in the league. His best seasons are kind of behind him in 2018, 2019, although last year in 2021, he did log 20 receptions for 332 yards and 2 touchdowns with the Houston Texans. Do you think this move will have any impact this week and going forward for the Titans?
Well, it's going to have some impact this week because unlike the past couple big name kind of washed up guys, the Titans have signed a receiver in Golden Tate and then Josh Gordon this season. Conley's on the active roster. I don't know. I think people didn't quite catch that. He wasn't signed to the practice squad. You can't sign somebody from another team's practice squad to your practice squad. So the Titans signed him to the active roster off of the Jaguars practice squad. Like you said, the last team he played for is the Texans. So he's going to know a lot about this team. He's going up against his most recent former team this week, and he's going to play in some capacity because he's going to be out there. in 2019, he had a big season. That wasn't that long ago. I could see him being an element. He's certainly not going to be a savior for this team, but he's what the Titans want in a receiver. He said this week he only knows how to play one way, which is full speed and extremely physically. And that is, I mean, if you want to describe what Mike Vrabel and John Robinson look for at the receiver position, that is it. So I think that he's going to play, and we'll see what kind of impact he has. It won't be nothing, and frankly, with the state of their wide receiver room right now, I think he's a welcome addition.
Moving on to someone who also loves to play hard and fast against this Houston Texans team, King Henry.
Kidding.
Let's talk about his averages over the last 3 games he's played against the Houston Texans. He's averaging 29.3 carries in those 3 games for an average of 224 yards, and he scored at least 2 touchdowns in games against the Houston Texans. I mean, he's just been a madman against them, and look for him to play very well this week.
Yeah, I'd say it's a fair bet. Just to put those in other words, he's only averaging as the greatest running back in the history of the league against the Texans is a fair way of putting that, I think, and quite the feat. So will we see another 200-yard performance? I don't know, but hey, guess what? This Texans defense, dead last in the league at the run stop. So it's going to be a big one for King Henry, and if you have him on your fantasy team, probably going to have a good week.
Moving on, let's talk about just something that was kind of funny this week. Let's talk about Bud Dupree and a couple of his comments that he had for this Titans team. This was from Sam Phelan on Twitter.
Friend of the show.
He talked about Bud Dupree identifying how the Titans have won 4 games in a row now. He said, "You got a bunch of goons. Goons on the team. Goon head coach." He said that goons get the last punch and make sure their punches count.
That's what goons do, man. Goon head coach is the part that's the cherry on top for me. I think that's
really
hilarious. But he's also not wrong. This team is a bunch of goons, and on the defensive front, which we've talked a lot about on this show, they are a lot of goons. Him and Jeffrey Simmons and Rashad Weaver and Tier Tart and Danico Autry, like, there's some dogs up there, and they hunt in a pack, and they are kind of the goon squad, and when they're rolling, it's a problem for other teams. And Mike Vrabel, it's funny, but also he's that kind of guy. He's kind of a goon, if that's what we're defining goon as. So this is a team that, if you had to boil their identity down, that physicality, that ferociousness, that mindset, they're a bunch of goons.
One last thing before we get out of here on this news segment. Not going to kind of impact the Titans this week, but something to keep on your radar as they go into a very pivotal matchup against the Chiefs next week. Of course, we're already talking about the Chiefs because can't give the Texans too much respect, on a Titans show here.
We can't overlook the Texans, man. Can't do it.
But we're also going to.
We are going to.
Let's talk about something that Adam Schefter reported, in that Frank Clark has been suspended for 2 games, of course missing this week, and also will be missing next week's game against the Titans.
Yep.
Anything you want to say about that? How big of an impact it will be for the Titans next week?
Massive deal, because he's their best pass rusher. He's maybe had his best season to date in his career this year. I'd have to go check and be sure, but he's been a top 5 player at his position so far this year. He's been mauling people. The Titans offensive line struggles against the top rated guys, those A++ pass rushers. They are not in a position to defend those guys right now. So it's a massive deal. We'll talk more about it next week, but that's huge for them. All right, that is JT with the news. All right, producer JT, it is time for my favorite segment of the week. As always, the best bet Gauntlet. We have a real close race on our hands. Let me tell you, I have had 3 straight struggling weeks, coming in at 2-3. Producer JT, after a 1-4 start in both of his first 2 weeks, has been on a tear and has caught all the way back up. We are now, I lead by a half pick, 17-16-2. You are at 17-17-1. Both kind of drawing dead right now in terms of making money, but we're going to continue to make money as the season goes on, and this could be a pivotal week for us in terms of who takes the lead in the competition. Of course, all of our picks documented on social media, BroadwaySportsMedia.com, either of our Twitter accounts at JT_Runke, at Easton Freeze, or the show account at Hot Read Pod. Be You should be following that if you aren't already. Let's get into our picks this week, because last week I lost once again. I have the first pick. And before, that's what we in the industry call a tease. Before we get into that, I got to let you know that if you are a business owner in Middle Tennessee or in Nashville, we have advertising opportunities both on this show as well as on our podcast network more broadly, any of our other shows, as well as on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. So we have got thousands of readers, tens of thousands of downloads, and hundreds of thousands of social media impressions available to you. We would love to advertise with you. Hit us up via social media or via email. You can find that information on BroadwaySportsMedia.com, but you can hit up the Broadway Sports Media Facebook or Twitter accounts and reach out. We'd love to talk to you about any advertising opportunities that we might have in store for you. So that's enough of the selling of the show. Just making sure I have all of my T's crossed and I's dotted. Yep, that's it. So let's talk about the best bets. My first pick this week, the first pick of the best bet gauntlet for week 8. I'm going with the Niners, -1.5 on the road, in air quotes, against LA. We know that this is not really a road game for the Niners. When they're playing in LA, they have more fans than the Rams do, frankly. And the Niners have always, in the regular season, had the number of Sean McVay and the Rams. Kyle Shanahan just owns him. McVay can't seem to figure him out, and I don't think that that's going to change, especially with the trajectory of these two teams. The Niners coming off of a rough couple of weeks, actually. I think with their injury situations, they're going to be bouncing back, trending in the right direction, and they need this win very badly, so they'll be motivated. The Rams, however, continue to seem to be striking dead to me. I don't see anything about this team that makes me want to bet them or think that they're going to be competitive. Everything to me screams take the Niners as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm rolling with them all day, twice on Sundays. Give me the Niners -1.5.
I really like that pick. You know, I was thinking about while you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I like the Niners, but it's going to be a close game. And then, of course, we really hadn't had an opportunity to talk about this on the show, just with given the technical difficulties last week. But now CMC is a very big factor for that Niners offense, and I keep kind of forgetting that he is still on the Niners there. So I really like that pick. My first pick this week, I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins -3.5. Going to Detroit to play the Lions. And while I had hope at the beginning of the season that Dan and the Motor City Kitties would just come out on fire, beat that win total, and prove that they can really play in this league like some of the other teams that have been surprising, it's just clear that they are still a couple of years away. Not to mention the injuries that they're dealing with, but also that defense has been horrid. I'm looking for Tua to get a second game under his belt and get this offense back on track. And I think they win this game by at least more than 3.5.
All right, with my second pick in the best bet gauntlet for week 8, give me the Jags -2.5. Now, they are playing a home game in my book. They're going to be in London, rise and shine this week against the... Who in the heck are they playing?
Denver Broncos.
Denver Broncos. Thank you. I couldn't find it. The Denver Broncos. Despite Russell's high knees down the aisle of the plane this week, I'm sure he's going to be loose. No doubt. He's for sure loose over there. He's loose in London. I don't see any reason why I'd be betting them. And the Jaguars, that's a home game for them over there in London, man. The NFL has been exporting their worst product for a couple of years now to London, and they've got a little cult following over there. There are more London Jacksonville fans maybe than NFL Jacksonville fans here in the U.S. rather. I've not seen any data to support that. The
claim
that claim. Thank you. Wow. You could hear
this. It's tough there.
You could hear the panic in my voice too. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a neutral field situation for them at all. I think the Jaguars will have the home field advantage. I think that they're a more competent, actually, I know that they're a more competent team than the Broncos right now, and both teams are in need of a win. I'm just going to pick the more competent team under a field goal. I love it. Give me the Jags -2.5.
Taking my second pick here, it's one that I'm going to take here that I don't love, but I kind of like. I'm going to take the Raiders -1 here against the Saints, going to the Saints. And this is really just a story of a team that is getting their season back on track and a team that continues to spiral out of control. The Saints look good sometimes, but
and then Andy Dalton
does Andy Dalton things. And as someone who has watched the Red Rifle throughout his lifetime here,
JT, Cincinnati native, he knows.
Cincinnati native. Seeing Andy Dalton, I just don't think they have enough. I think they're still nursing a lot of injuries. I think that is still a very banged up team. And despite last week, I think the Raiders are starting to find their identity a little bit here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go on a little bit of a winning streak after their early bye. So give me the Raiders to win this one, basically in what I consider a pick'em, just outright at -1.
All right, my third pick, I'm riding with the commies, baby. +3. I'm not buying Sam Ehlinger and the Colts. I'm not buying them. Really the only thing that scares me in this matchup is that, sometimes when you get that rookie QB new QB bump from a team, the defense plays a little bit better, but I'm just not buying it with this team. I don't know if the Colts have given up. They may have, frankly. Who'd have thunk in week 8 that it would be Colts and Commanders, Taylor Heineke and Sam Ehlinger, and not Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, who both these teams traded for, these premier guys, both of them on the bench for different reasons. But I really like what Heineke is really flawed. He's imperfect. He's not necessarily better than Wentz, but he's got DNA that Wentz doesn't have. He's a gamer. He's got a little bit of it factor that Wentz just really struggles with, and he's a no risk it, no biscuit kind of guy. So I really like him and that full complement of weapons that he's going to have this week against the Colts. So give me the Commanders +3. Love getting the full 3 there. I'll take them to win outright.
Dang, I wish I would have saw that one because I would have picked them. I totally overlooked that team.
Yeah.
Going on, let's see, what do we got here on the board? I'm looking at this one mostly because I just think it's too many points simply this week. And there's a couple of those games. But the one I think has the most likelihood of being a game that just has too many points is this Cowboys-Bears game. Give me the Bears +9.5. They're not a good team by any stretch of the imagination, but they have put up a fight in a couple of the last 2 or 3 weeks here, and have surprised a couple people. I'm taking them more so that I think it's a low-scoring game, and I also just don't know the true identity of this Cowboys team with Dak under center.
Very fair.
So give me the Bears to at least not win this game, but cover 9.5 points here.
I like that play. With my 4th pick, I'm going to ride with the Browns. And this is important to note. If you're going to get this number, you better get it now, because by the time you're hearing this, it probably has already changed with the news that Jamar Chase is probably headed to the IR and definitely isn't playing in this game. Browns +3 in this divisional matchup is probably going to continue to shrink. I like getting them at the full field goal. I like that push potential if things go sideways for me, but I just think I'm not fully bought in yet on the Bengals. I just don't know if they've really figured it out like people think that they've figured it out. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think they've not beaten anybody recently that impresses me. And while the Browns certainly aren't impressive right now, I think the Browns are the kind of team that could stifle the Bengals, and as long as they don't turn the ball over, I kind of like them to be really competitive in this divisional matchup. So give me the Browns to cover with 3 points given to them.
Our first matchup of the week here, funny enough, because I will be taking the Bungles here at -3, going up the road to Cleveland. Of course, it is a little unfortunate not having Jamar, and hopefully Vegas will see that and make this line even lower. But I like them here at the 3 for a couple of reasons. One, I think this might be the week where you finally, last week you saw Joe Burrow put up just another Joe Burrow-esque performance that we've seen in the past 2 years so far. I think this is where this team rallies around that win last week and finally puts it all together. Another reason they're going to put it all together, they have a lot of people coming back from injury this week. One of the most notable is Trey Hendrickson on that defensive line. I think he's going to make a massive improvement to this defense here. And without Jamar, I mean, the weapons that they still have on this team, I think you forget that Tyler Boyd is their wide receiver number 3. I think T. Higgins moved up to that wide receiver 1, and Tyler Boyd is still a very, very dangerous weapon on that offense. So give me the Bengals -3. And it's really funny, of course, with this Jamar thing. Someone just sent me a tweet from Kelsey Conway. She's an Inquirer reporter, and she said that when she was speaking to some sources about the Jamar Chase hip injury, they said the reason that the timeline is so up in the air regarding his return is that the team hopes because of his physical makeup, Jamar's hip will heal faster than the average person. So Jamar Chase is he's that dude. He's got that dog in him, and
maybe, I guess. That's interesting.
He's literally just built different. So give me the Bengals -3 in this game.
All right, with my 5th pick of the best bet gauntlet in week 8, give me the Cardinals +3.5. Rarely am I gonna ride with my boy Cliff, but I love getting the hook here, and I like this spot for the Cardinals. If you look at the Cardinals, with and without DeAndre Hopkins, the numbers are staggering. The splits with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, with and without DeAndre Hopkins, it's clearly massive. It's a massive deal for them. He's now got 1 game under his belt back this season. I think this week he's going to take another step. The Vikings are not a great team in defending these star wide receivers. So as much as I like the Vikings this year, and truly I do, I kind of see this as a spot to bet the Cardinals. I really like this play. Give me the Cardinals with the hook at +3.5.
So it's not going to be like last week where we had 3 head-to-head matchups, but we are going to have 2 because I am going to take the Vikings -3.5 here.
All right.
And more so for the reason that I just don't like to go against Kirk Cousins in a noon/1 o'clock spot at home.
He's a juggernaut.
Yeah. He is a juggernaut. I think another reason is that they're at home and they're coming off the bye. I think that it's a high-scoring game for sure, but I think that I'm going to pick this new formed Vikings identity and team over a Cliff Kingsbury ran offense.
All right, so to recap here, JT rolling with his favorites -3.5 for the Miami -3.5, the Raiders -1, the Bengals -3, and the Vikings -3.5, and then 1 dog riding the Bears +9.5. Too many points is the rationale there. I got 2 favorites, the Niners -1.5 and the Jags -2.5, and then a couple dogs, Commanders +3, Browns +3, Cards +3.5. That's going to do it for us on a Friday. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed Titans at Texans on Sunday. I am going to go get married, so I'll see you on Monday with a ring on my finger and a new beautiful wife. And I can't wait. JT, he'll be there as well. We're going to have a great time on Saturday night.
It's going to be so fun.
It's going to be awesome, and we're going to wake up and watch the Titans game on Sunday and be back with you here on Monday morning to recap all of this weekend's action. Until then, I'm Easton Freeze, with producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you on Monday.